All right.
Welcome.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to our joint meeting. I am Chris Malmstrom. I'm the chair of the Salem Democratic City Committee. I was really excited to reach out to Beverly and Marblehead and have them be as excited to do something like this with me. So I am very pleased to introduce as well Renee Keeney and Jim Thompson, as well as Hannah from Beverly and Marblehead and Beverly, respectively, who are here kind of co-hosting this meeting with me. Really excited to have you all. Really excited to welcome Beverly and Marblehead, as well as Salem, all into the space to talk about kind of Salem Sound and what we can do to plan and prepare for the best future for the Sound and our waterways. So with us tonight for this presentation, we are really excited to have Erina Keefe, the Sustainability Director of Beverly, Lynn, Bryant, Camron, Adibi, and James Ashton from Sustainable Marblehead, as well as Pat Gozemba and Cindy Keegan from SAFE, Salem Alliance for the Environment. The way that this forum is going to work, we will have 15 minutes about for each of the cities that we'll be preparing. And one sec, gotta stop share. So 15 minutes for each of our presenters. And then at the end of that, we will have about 30 minutes of Q&A. I will be moderating the Q&A and you all will be submitting your questions to me via the chat. I'm actually gonna change my name here to questions to kind of just make it easier for you. That way, if somebody who is like, you know, Cindy Keegan is talking, or Lynn Bryant's talking, or someone, and you have a question that pops in your mind, but we're not quite at that Q&A session, you have submitted it to the chat, you know that it's there, and nobody's going to forget about it because I'll keep track of it for you. All right, cool, excellent. Without further ado, I'm going to kind of hand the reins over to Hannah and Jim for introducing our first speaker.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Jim Thompson. I'm the chair of the Beverly Democratic City Committee. And I really want to welcome everyone and also to thank all the people who've worked hard to put this together. I think just in my time with the Beverly Democratic City Committee, this is the first sort of inter-city event like this, and I'm really excited about it. I think it's really, we all need to work together, and I'm really happy. The way our committee works is that Hannah Bowen, who you're going to meet in a second, is our vice chair, and she's heavily involved in our outreach committee that works with all the events that we're involved in. And so I'm going to introduce her, Hannah Bowen, the vice chair of the Beverly Democratic City Committee.
Great, thanks, Jim. And yeah, we're going to move right through a whole lot of faces. But I think one of the nice things about Zoom, kind of, you know, even more than in person, is that we can see everyone and can actually do some introductions in the chat. I know Chris will be keeping an eye on the questions, so we don't want to clog it up once we get into the speakers, but would love to see who else is on the line and which city, town you're calling in from. So I'm from Beverly, as Jim said, and the vice chair of the committee, and really excited to have this forum, and really especially excited to hear from Erina Keefe, who is Beverly's sustainability director. And she's our first sustainability director, I believe, and came into the position last year in the midst of the pandemic, but I think with a lot of support and, you know, some really active groups around the city of Beverly. So we have an active waste reduction committee and clean energy group, and, you know, throughout this month celebrating Earth Day and Earth Month, really, there's been just a ton of activity around the city, and it's really exciting to see, and particularly grateful that we now have somebody right in City Hall coordinating across all those groups and coordinating across the region. So one of the things that we're looking forward to hearing more about and to collaborating with all of you on is what comes out of the Resilient Together work. And Erina has dived right into that as well. So I think I can hand over, and I'm also pleased because I grew up in Swampscott, and I believe Erina grew up in Lynn. So we're covering more of the North Shore than even just the Salem Sound tonight. So with that, might hand it over to Erina, and we'll dive into the conversation.
Excellent. Thank you, Hannah, for the introduction. And I am going to try starting by sharing some slides. So bear with me for a second here. So first of all, thank you for selecting climate resilience as a topic for your forum. And it seems like maybe one of the first times that these three groups are gathering together, which is really encouraging to see. And also thank you for inviting me to participate in the panel. I do see a lot of new faces, so I'm kind of glad that you're glad to connect with Democratic committees and glad that you're all joining forces with each other. In another context, I'd love to hear about the work that you are all doing. So as Hannah mentioned, I'm the Sustainability Director. My name's Erina. Been with the city for exactly 6 months now. And that means that a lot of the work that I'll be sharing today has really been championed by other people. So I'm going to try to do the projects justice. My position is the first in Beverly that's, laser focused on sustainability. This position was created by Mayor Cahill's administration because the administration is really committed to making sure that Beverly does our part to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and try to keep us all below our global limit of 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming. So since tonight's focus is on resilience, I'm just going to kind of briefly share an overview of the city's sustainability work and then introduce the Resilient Together Climate Action Plan that Hannah had mentioned, and then share a little bit about 2 coastal resilience projects that we have going on right now. So at a very, very high level, my goal is to really kind of design and to implement projects and programs and policies that are going to advance us toward our goal of reaching carbon neutrality by mid-century. And that term sustainability is kind of all encompassing. If you do it right, it covers a lot of ground. So that kind of in reality means we're working on solar projects and EV electric vehicle charging infrastructure expansion and, improving our recycling practices community-wide, trying to expand our compost program participation across the city. Building strategic partnerships with our utility, National Grid, as well as our community partners. Hannah, you talked a little bit about the committees that we have in Beverly, and I want to just say how thrilled I've been working here and getting to know all of the volunteer groups that are active in Beverly. It's really impressive and shows such a nice sense of community. So it's a good group to work with. I'm also kind of celebrating the work that our Department of Public Services has done and has continued to do, especially in our municipal buildings in terms of improving our heating and cooling systems. So this is kind of topically the categories that I would sort of plunk my work in. And Resilient Together is our climate action plan. And I know a group from Salem is going to be presenting later today, but I can speak to kind of the city side of this collaboration. Our goal in working with our neighbors in Salem is that, well, we know climate impacts don't really have they don't know municipal borders, and all of climate impacts are going to, hit us all in the region similarly. So we might as well kind of work together to try to do what we can. So this is just kind of a snapshot overview of the types of climate impacts that we're going to expect to see in this area. So walking you through those a little bit, we've already kind of seen some increases in precipitation. We know that we're going to see more intense storms in the future. We're looking at about 5.5 more inches of rainfall by 2050, depending on the projection that you use. And similarly, this is going to be kind of a focus of tonight is looking at sea level rise. So by 2050, we're looking to see about 3 feet, depending on your risk level, of course, of increased sea level rise. And we've already seen almost 1 foot so far in the past century. And then bumping over to heat waves. For the last 50 or so years, we had seen fewer than 10 annual days above 90 degrees, half a century ago. And now by 2050, so just a couple decades away now, we're looking at an additional month of days above 90 degrees. So it's significant, right? And so our climate action plan is kind of divided up into 7 plan elements. I'm not going to kind of describe all of them right now in the interest of time, but just so you get a sense of the ground that we're trying to cover here in across buildings and development, energy, infrastructure, natural resources, public health and safety, mobility, and solid waste. And in each of these 7 plan elements, kind of across them all, there are action items that relate to resilience specifically. And I just pulled out a couple from a few of the categories to give you a sense of the type of work that we're considering, the types of policies that we're thinking about implementing at the municipal level. The first is in the buildings and development category. So looking at overlay zoning districts. So what would it look like if we kind of established minimum flood resilience design guidelines or standards? So any new building that is constructed in an area that we know is going to see some sea level rise will have to be built to certain standards to make sure that they're not going to be negatively impacted in the future. And then in the natural resources category, we're looking at wetlands ordinances. So creating kind of the buffer zones for areas that we know might get flooded. For infrastructure, we're looking at stabilizing the public shoreline. How can we use nature-based solutions to kind of naturalize that coastline instead of responding to people living around the coast asking for a seawall that goes all up and down New England? We know that that's not possible. And then public health and safety. So we talked about heat waves and heat stress a minute ago. So how can we expand the cooling capacity of Beverly and Salem by investing in heat reducing infrastructure and kind of defining the cooling centers that you could go to around the community. So typically when I'm talking about Resilient Together, I do talk a little bit more about mitigation than resilience. And this is just giving you a very, very quick kind of snapshot of our portfolio, if you will, of greenhouse gas emissions community-wide. Most of them come from the transportation sector, so people driving their personal vehicles, and the way that we heat and cool our homes and our buildings. Oh. Okay, so I'm kind of brazenly stealing some slides here from my colleagues. Our engineering and planning departments are leading this project, and we have engaged Tetra Tech as our consultants, along with Woods Hole Group doing much of the research. And earlier tonight, I heard someone mention Barbara Warren from Salem Sound Coast Watch, and she and her team have been very involved in both of these projects. So I'm going to use all of that as an excuse. So if you have any questions, I have my blanket excuse card if I have to get back to you later and I can't answer them now. So these were prepared kind of in advance of a public forum that's going to take place this Wednesday, which I encourage you all to attend. So you're really some of the first people from the general public that are going to see some of these images, but we're looking at a sewage pump station at the end of Water Street, and that's located just about here. It's called Sandy Point for those of you familiar with Beverly. And so this is a sewerage conveyance facility, and the average daily kind of pumping capacity is about 11 million gallons per day. It's pumping out all 100% of the sanitary sewage from Beverly over to the wastewater treatment plant in Salem, as well as taking in Danvers as well. So just to orient you a little bit, you kind of see this red line of where the sewage is coming from along Danvers to Beverly, across the water to the Salem wastewater treatment plant. So you can kind of guess why it's important, but just to give you a little bit of background from some previous planning studies, the Coastal Resilience Plan from 2017 and our Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness designation in 2019. Both of these identified the sewer pump station as a high priority asset that's at risk, because you can just kind of imagine and use your imagination in picturing what might go wrong if something is impacted at this pump station. So we thank CZM for their coastal resilience grant here. And I'm going to kind of breeze through some slides to show you what the kind of sea level rise projections are. So this is looking at a high tide scenario with wave action and sea level rise. What's the probability of seeing a flood by 2030? Can you see my cursor? I'm just going to kind of float over the pump station here. And then as we bump up to 2050, we can see this kind of water level nudging into the community. And then by 2070, this is what it's going to look like. So by 2030, the mean high tide on a sunny day, so this is no storm being considered, is going to be kind of nudging up into the beach line here, up into the coast. And by 2070, you can start to see that mean height, the kind of typical high tide on a sunny day coming up the street, up Water Street. So this project is really a feasibility study to kind of understand what the real threats are and to kind of start to plot out different strategies that we can take to protect the pump station. So the kind of responses here are being categorized into three different types of response. The first is to imagine. So what are the land use patterns around the area? What are the properties doing around the pump station? How can we think about other kind of coastal solutions to enhance the beach? And the next is to reinforce. So this is kind of more of the hardening option here to protect the floodgate, to protect the, building out potentially a small seawall along the perimeter to really fortify that pump station. And then the last is to retreat. So this is not, an ideal option, I think, but you really got to think about all of them in our kind of combat against climate change. Is where else might this pump station be able to live that could still connect to the infrastructure that's existing in the ground right now and still continue to kind of send all of the waste into that Salem facility. So that's kind of the strategy now. There is a public forum that I'll share more information about a little bit later. And then the next project, again, not the lead here, so I'll talk on behalf of the planning and engineering departments, is looking at Aubert Park. And Aubert Park is a neighborhood park that has been used since before World War II. It's located along the tidally influenced Danvers River. It's got tennis courts, baseball fields, picnic area, marshy kind of grassland area, and a little beach like you see here in this photo where people like to fish from, launch their kayaks from. And as you might be able to see in the photos from 2014 and 2020, that over time, folks had started to notice that this beach, the field along the beach has started to erode back. You can see the sign starting to poke out here. So this is really a study of coastal erosion. And similarly, this project was identified as a kind of high risk, high priority asset. And we were awarded a $60,000 grant, nearly $60,000 grant from the Coastal Zone Management to do a feasibility study and also to start thinking about some conceptual designs.
That is medically defined, but.
So the goal is really to figure out what the responses from the city will be. So what's appropriate in terms of installing natural protections that can help to stop erosion and degradation of Aubert Park. And the project involved a kind of extensive public surveying. This is just a snapshot of one of the questions that came out of the survey, which is really asking folks, what are you most concerned about? How can we respond to that? And some of the top concerns listed here were loss of beach, riverbank erosion, and sea level rise. So these are just kind of two categories or types of responses here. The first is to stabilize the beach area by using some berms, really controlling where people are accessing the water from through creating walkways. And then the next would be to kind of stabilize the shoreline by installing kind of more vegetation, planting more vegetation to prevent that erosion. So if you do want to get involved, we have a few things coming up. We're going to be completing both of these feasibility studies by the end of June. And in the meantime, if you want to learn a little bit more, there's going to be 2 public forums for the sewer pump station. That's going to be on the 29th, that's Thursday, not Wednesday, as well as in June. And in Aubert Park, there will be a second one in June as well. We are going to have a public comment period for the Resilient Together plan that will be available for you all. And I'd encourage you all to check it out and let us know what you think in June. And that is really it. So I'm gonna stop there and hand it back to you, Hannah or Chris or Jim. Thanks.
Thanks, and right over to Marblehead, I think.
Yes. Thank you, Erina. That was a really interesting report. And you would certainly encourage folks to turn out for the forum too. So I'm just letting somebody else in here. Okay, thanks. I'm really grateful tonight that we have our Sustainable Marblehead folks with us tonight, and I'm really proud to introduce Lynn Bryant. I'm glad she was able to join us. Lynn is the Executive Director of Sustainable Marblehead, and before joining Sustainable, she served at a number of other nonprofits, including she was president of the advisory board for the Women's Fund of Essex County, a volunteer with hospice and the Peabody Essex Museum as well. She's here along with Camron and I'm sorry, I'm blanking on James Ashton. So I'll let her introduce them and take it away. Thanks, Lynn.
Thank you, Renee. And thank you all for having us. We're really excited to be a part of this conversation tonight and very flattered to be asked. So thank you. Thank you, Erina, for that presentation. I think in Marblehead, I speak for a lot of us when I say we'd really like to clone you and have you here as well, because we're not quite lucky enough yet to have a sustainability manager, but your presentation showed us all that is possible and that exists. I invited James Ashton and Cam Adibi to join me this evening because they are 2 of the leaders of our Harbor Working Group. James was the founder of the group. He put the group together for us in early 2020, and Cam is the current leader. So we are going to divide up our allotted time, and I am going to just give a kind of a brief overview of Sustainable Marblehead, particularly for those of you in Salem and Beverly who may not be familiar with us. And then James and Cam will give you a little more information about what some of the focuses of our Harbor Working Group are. So Sustainable Marblehead was founded in 2016, and we're a volunteer community organization that works with our town's residents, businesses, town departments, and town leadership to reduce carbon emissions and waste. We have close to 100 volunteers, many of whom are professionals in the areas of our work that they're supporting. So we're a very dynamic organization that's offering thought leadership to our community. We have 5 working groups, our clean energy and public policy, conservation, education, harbor, and town trees and urban forestry. And we also have an activity-based committee, Bike Marblehead. And it's through the work of all of these groups that we make our impact. I want to just give you a couple of examples of how we're currently working with town departments and elected officials. Our clean energy and public policy working group is actively supporting Marblehead's commitment to carbon neutrality by 2040. And one of the ways that we are doing that is through our participation in the town's Green Marblehead Committee, which includes representation from our Board of Selectmen, several town departments, and Marblehead Municipal Light Department. With community participation and a little prodding from our Sustainable Marblehead representatives, the committee has identified 2040 as our carbon neutral goal, and we're actively supporting efforts to create a plan for achieving that goal. And we introduced our own plan, our carbon-free Marblehead 2040, which is a climate action plan framework as a guideline for how these goals can be met. And we have that available for anybody who's interested in reading it on our website. Another example of how we're working with the community, just this past weekend, our tree working group organized a group of 26 volunteers that included members of Sustainable Marblehead, a couple of our local garden clubs, and Marblehead High School students to help our town's part-time tree warden plant 30 new town trees. We've lost a lot of trees over the last few decades, and we're doing all we can to support replanting. We were really gratified when our tree warden told one of our volunteers that he would not have been able to get the trees planted without our support. We also educate and engage the broader community on how we can all reduce our impact on the environment with regular social media posts, a monthly electronic newsletter, monthly articles in our local newspaper, and with some great new content on our recently redesigned website. And over the past fall and winter, we held a series of 8 webinars on a variety of topics. So we realized about 1.5 years ago that we really should expand our focus to include Marblehead Harbor and the surrounding ocean. In addition to its incredible beauty, the harbor offers so much to our town in terms of recreation and to some extent commerce. And its continued health and vitality are really essential to the well-being of Marblehead as a whole. So we formed a harbor working group in early 2020, and despite the pandemic, we had a great first summer focused on introducing the group to various stakeholders in the community and on promoting best green boating practices. Before James and Cam go into greater depth on this, I do want to mention that our harbor group, in partnership with our clean energy, conservation, and education groups, will be introducing our first Marblehead Ocean Week from June 5th to the 12th. The idea came from our interest in recognizing World Oceans Day, which is on June 8th. And the themes that we'll be presenting throughout the week are innovation in green technology, green boating, storm drains and stormwater, beach conservation, microplastics awareness, and habitat and oyster restoration. So after a long year, we're really excited to get back into the community. We feel like it's going to be our coming out party, and we'll be offering information, demonstrations, and some appropriately distanced community activities. So we want to go into a little bit more detail about what some of our focuses are. So I am now going to turn it over to James Ashton.
Unmute. Thank you, Lynn. So I'm going to, as the founder of the Harbor Working Group, I'm just going to speak briefly as around the sort of genesis of the group and the idea, as Lynn said, you know, that the opportunity we saw to extend the Sustainable Marblehead mission to those that were, you know, on or near the water. And as much like Salem and Beverly, boating in Salem Sound of all types is a huge thing. And we saw the opportunity to connect with people's passion for the water to cultivate more of a sense of, you know, environmental stewardship. So last summer, you know, in the midst of the pandemic, it was kind of challenging to figure out how to get out there, where obviously people were overwhelmed, frankly, from all that was going on. But we saw the opportunity we knew that since no one knew who we were going to basically have a moment to collect information, find out what was really in the hearts and minds of Marblehead residents around the harbor. And we realized going out to the boating community was a key opportunity there. We decided after a number of conversations to basically move forward with a green boating message. And I want to mention it briefly here because I think it could be an opportunity for the other towns. And also these are opportunities to speak to people about coastal resiliency. But out of the gate, our last summer, we partnered with Sailors for the Sea, a Newport-based organization that is a fabulous organization that does a lot of education around essentially green boating practices with, so we're able to basically use their great content to go out to our community and promote sustainable use of the waterways, from clean, using green products to responsible marine head discharge to responsible refueling and what have you. And so we started a relationship with the boating community here in Marblehead at Sustainable Marblehead through this messaging, which we really think was, kicked it off very well. And I think this is a unique opportunity for all of us to get together tonight. We are more than willing to share that content and our contacts over at Sailors for the Sea to extend this effort around Salem Sound, because sustainable use of boating is critical. So, so that's going to continue to be a key part of our Ocean Week. And then lastly, a big part of what we're doing with the boating community is shrink wrap recycling. And again, if that's of interest, we have opportunities for turnkey, low-cost shrink wrap recycling that we're doing here in Marblehead with boat yards and with the municipality, and we're looking to extend that around the Sound. So we have resources there if anybody wants to participate in that. So with that, I want to hand it over to Cam, who's going to speak more to what this next year has in store for our group. Thank you.
Thanks, James. Yeah, I'm Camron Adibi. I am currently leading the same Sustainable Marblehead Harbor Group, which James initiated. And yeah, this is great to be part of this meeting. Thank you for the invitation. Yeah, we have this very exciting event that's coming up. So first of all, our Harbor Group, we're probably we have about maybe 20 members, but 10 to 12 active members that meets once. We meet once a month, second Tuesday of every month on Zoom. And we've been planning this Marblehead Ocean Week, as Lynn mentioned, for the last, since December, basically. So we're really, really excited about this. I'd like to encourage everyone to also be in this group, to be participate if you in your own town, or come visit us, and we can use more volunteers. As Lynn said, we have multiple themes. So it's going to be from June 5th to June 12th. And I'm just a couple of them. Stormwater, of course, is a big one for every town. One of our members has been very proactive and launched a Adopt a Drain program. So we are going to have, I think this is a great example of working with the town as a volunteer group. We reached out to the drain department, and they're very much on board. And we also reached out to the selectmen, and they're very much on board with this. So we're going to just start out with 100 placards that we're going to put on 100 storm drain catchments in high traffic areas. And we raised the money for this program to start. So this is one thing we're going to kind of announce during Marblehead Ocean Week and try to get more people to adopt a drain, so to speak. And the other key one that I have a background in ecological restoration, and I invited a speaker about oyster restoration and habitat restoration, as somebody mentioned earlier about nature-based solutions. And we had a webinar with this woman, and it really kind of just took off. There's just so many people now that are kind of interested in this oyster restoration and habitat restoration kind of model, which other towns have been using. And we're just want to kind of gauge interest and see who might be also be willing to support something like this as in terms of a way to improve water quality. So we're going to have we're going to have an event on June 11th that we're going to showcase actually an upweller that's actually here in town that's under the Mass Oyster Project. So it's a lot going on. Finally, something, engage the youth. We're sponsoring a youth media competition. So this is for Marblehead students, K through 12. And basically the topic is wide open. The question is, what does a clean harbor and a clean ocean look like to you? And we're asking for videos, podcast, artwork, news stories. So if any, and I'm going to turn it back to Lynn, but any questions, please let me know. Thank you.
Lynn, you're muted. Yep, there we go.
There we are, great. Thank you, Cam. Thank you, James. And before we conclude here, I just want to quickly mention a couple of the town of Marblehead's initiatives around recent and current initiatives around efforts to address harbor and coastal vulnerability. Like Beverly, Marblehead received a Massachusetts Coastal Zone Management Coastal Resiliency Grant to study projected sea levels in 4 locations in Marblehead, projecting sea level rise in 2030, 2050, and 2070. And that project was also managed by Salem Zone Coast Watch, and the study was conducted by the Woods Hole Group. The results were shared with the community last year during 3 presentations. And the study included an assessment of our current infrastructure and recommendations for adaptation going forward. If you're interested in learning more about this, the study is available on Salem Sound Coast Watch's website. And we have heard from Marblehead's harbor master that Marblehead is planning to, is working on a new harbor study to update the study that was done in 2009. And I don't have too much information on the timing of this. I know an RFP went out, but I am not sure when they plan on doing the study, but we're hoping that it will be within the year. So with that, we can say thank you.
All right, thank you all for that excellent presentation about what's going on in Marblehead. It's really wonderful. Excellent. So our next speaker will be, I feel like they don't need a lot of introduction, so I'll kind of keep it short, but we have Pat Gozemba and Cindy Keegan from SAFE, our Salem Alliance for Energy. And in setting up this project, these are the names that I heard most frequently as people who would be really great to have about this. So I'm excited to hear their perspective about resiliency efforts in the Salem Sound. And I know that our Pat Gozemba is just recently an award winner, so congratulations to her for that excellent honor. And yeah, so without further ado, I will kind of give that over to Cindy and Pat and let them take it away.
All right, so I think I'm sharing my screen. Is it showing up? Okay.
You're good, Cindy.
Pat, you're muted, but do you want to start? Or maybe not.
Sorry, it's the problem being 5,000 miles away. Thanks very much, Chris, for introducing me and Cindy. And we're really happy to be hearing about what's going on in Beverly and Marblehead. I think I probably knew more about what was going on in Beverly from the joint project Resilient Together that Beverly and Salem are running. So congratulations to Beverly for taking the lead there and doing so much. I just wanted to say that about SAFE, that we were founded in 2001, shortly after 9/11, because we all realized that there was a pointless struggle going on worldwide for control over fossil fuels and control over our use of them. And actually being able to have access to them. So we formed SAFE so we could advocate around the closing of the coal burning power plant in Salem. That was our major goal. That was a reason we really wanted to become involved in it. And our goal always was to move to something that would be cleaner, renewable, et cetera. And we knew that we needed to form an organization that was based in Salem so that people in Salem could make it clear, both to our city administration and our elected officials on Beacon Hill, that we were not in support of a coal burning power plant, that we really wanted that plant to be closed. And so that was our big initiative to form SAFE. So we've got a lot of stuff going on right now. Mainly, we're focusing on offshore wind. We have been focusing since 2016 on gas leaks and stopping the use of natural gas, not only in Salem, but also throughout the Commonwealth and hopefully the US. So we'll talk a little bit tonight, Cindy and I, about our current passion right now of the moment that we're working on, which is offshore wind. So Cindy, you want to give us a little intro into why SAFE is thinking about offshore wind so much right now?
Sure. So, so I'm just going to go ahead and move forward. And I would encourage folks, if they want to learn more about the resilience, more of the resiliency specific projects, the Resilient Together website is great for both Beverly and Salem. But part of SAFE's focus at the moment is really looking at a little bit bigger picture, but still connected with that, with the power plant and the resources that are in Salem. We know we need to tackle the climate crisis, and we know that that is going to take big actions. And thankfully so much with the new administration, some of the hurdles that have been there in the past are finally starting to break loose, and we're starting to see some real action starting to take place, not only in some of these plans that different places are putting together, both at the federal level and at each of the state levels, but also we're starting to see permitting moving forward that had been held up forever, right? And so, so we know that we need to do some major reductions in how we generate our energy so that it's not hurting our climate. And so why offshore wind? Just generally, specifically right now in the Massachusetts goals, we're looking at 5,600 megawatts of power that they want to have in the system to start. That's the current level that's being looked at. We've got about 2,000 to 3,000 that are kind of in the pipeline. That's all mostly on the South Shore, so we all hear that all the time. But when you look at the offshore wind resources, you'll see that this really bright red is all New England. And comparatively, if you look at solar, for instance, as an option, we have much less solar potential than we have offshore wind potential in the New England area. And so offshore wind is going to be part of this puzzle. It's going to need to be part of this puzzle. And particularly in our region, it's going to need to be part of this puzzle. And so, I'm going to go back, sorry. So we're going to look at that, and then I'm going to hand it over to Pat to talk a little bit about how we're seeing it from SAFE's perspective in Salem.
Okay, so what most of you probably know living in the North Shore is that Salem has a long and storied maritime history, that in fact Salem gained this worldwide reputation as being this very powerful, wonderful place because so many clipper ships, sailing ships came from Salem, went to all the ports of the world and made Salem known to the world. And the riches of Salem, such as they were in the 19th century, were all built from the gathering of wealth from around the world that those clipper ships were able to participate in. And I don't want to in any way condone colonialism. We weren't trying to go out there, or we certainly would not be proud of and are not proud of both the history of Salem that ties into, as we're finding out now, into the slave trade. It also tied into the building of capitalism in the United States, and the success of both the United States and Salem was very deeply tied into the sea. When we first started looking at offshore wind, we were concerned about, I'm a bird nerd. I was very concerned about birds and what was going to happen with wind turbines and bird migration patterns, et cetera. And I was very, very disappointed when National Audubon Society didn't jump right out there and say that they were in support of offshore wind, because after all, we all knew that global greenhouse gas emissions were really killers, not for just us, for the planet, for all of the life that is on this planet. But National Audubon Society took its time, and they did very thorough studies over multi-years to assure that the wind turbines, the offshore wind turbines in particular, and that's what we're talking about now. We're not talking about onshore wind turbines, but the offshore wind turbines would be able to accommodate bird migration patterns. And National Audubon Society's work has been very careful about that. And they are fully in support of offshore wind. And also the National Wildlife Federation, most of us in New England, and I know I'm in Hawaii right now, but we'll be back in Salem soon. And we are very enamored of our whales, the humpback whales that we see around New England, all of the whales, the endangered right whale. And when National Wildlife Federation came out in support of offshore wind, that personally meant a lot to me, because it meant that not only the National Audubon Society, but the NWF were looking carefully at this and giving a green light to this technology. SAFE became involved in supporting offshore wind back in 2003. I was scanning over the last few days what the history was of SAFE with offshore wind. And in 2003, we wrote our first letter supporting offshore wind to legislators. And we allied ourselves at that time as one of the early chapters of Mass Climate Action Network. And we signed on with Mass Climate Action Network to many letters of support for offshore wind, beginning back in 2003, 2004. 2004 was actually when we signed our first letter supporting Cape Wind specifically. And, there weren't a lot of groups that were going out there, environmental groups that were going out there and supporting Cape Wind, but living so close to a coal burning power plant made us realize that we really needed to find an alternative to that coal burning plant. So over the period between 2004 and 2012, I'm not going to go through it all, but in 2012, SAFE ran its first program on offshore wind, and we hosted the screening of Cape Spin, which was a kind of mockumentary made about the folks who were opposing Cape Wind. And we know that there were very moneyed opponents of Cape Wind on Cape Cod. And they prevailed. They prevailed certainly by blocking the landing of any transmission cables on the Cape. Town by town, they went through the Cape and they shored up banning of the landing of transmission cables there. So that was one of the things when SAFE supported somebody just put something up in the chat, and I should not be reading the chat while I'm trying to talk. But what offshore wind really, what the opponents of Cape Wind actually were able to do was drag it out, do court case after court case, and make it impossible for Cape Wind to move forward. So the long and the short of the campaign for Cape Wind, we all know it was unsuccessful. We were very supportive of Cape Wind, just as we are now being very supportive of Vineyard Wind, and we will be very supportive of all of the wind projects on the South Coast. Okay, Cindy, why don't you go ahead and talk a little bit more about what we're thinking of now.
Sure. So to step back a little bit and make sure we're clear, when we're talking offshore wind these days, unlike Cape Wind, which was in state waters that were closer, all of the offshore wind projects these days are all in federal waters. So they're much farther out to shore. They're not in the viewshed. So that's one of the big differences. When the reason that we're seeing so much development on the South Shore is because they're shallower waters. And so one of the other big changes that is being worked on now and is being tested now are floating turbines or deep water turbines. So that technology is rapidly coming online, and that will mean that there will be more drive to harness that red area of wind that we saw in the Gulf of Maine and north. So while all of the current projects are certainly slated for the South Shore, based on both Massachusetts' need for renewables as well as Maine and New Hampshire, we know that there will ultimately be development going north along the shores as well. And so we really see this as a regional opportunity for not only Salem, but Beverly and Marblehead and Gloucester and Newburyport and all of the region has an opportunity that we need to start planning for now. We should have probably been planning for many years ago. The South Shore and the region south of the South Shore is seeing rapid growth in port infrastructure and all of the other things that go along with the potential for the offshore wind industry. And so specifically, you know, we have seen a draft presentation as part of the Port Authority meeting that is being developed by Lloyd's Register through a working group through Mass Clean Energy Center. So they're looking at all of the ports north of Boston now to try to understand what the possibilities are. And Salem is certainly very uniquely positioned, frankly, better than New Bedford, better than Brayton. And so, you know, all you have to do is look at a Google map and look at what they have to go through when they leave New Bedford, or what they would have to go through when they leave Brayton Point, to realize that Salem doesn't have any obstructions coming out of their harbor. So we have an existing deep water port with an existing 40 acres or so that are currently undeveloped, that held, you know, for years, large coal piles. So it's likely much more hardened than what they had to go through in New Bedford, which they recently filled that whole area and then had to pile drive to make sure that it could support the weights of things being moved. So so we just think that, you know, we've got some unique opportunity here in Salem to be considering different types of offshore wind support. But what, you know, we want to make sure is that we don't lose that opportunity by developing it in a different way that would preclude this possibility as an option. So, you know, in addition, you know, we did make sure that in the community benefits agreement, as Pat mentioned, one of the things that stymies a lot of offshore wind projects is how to and where to land the power. It only makes sense to land the power at an existing power hub. I mean, you don't have to, but it's pretty logical. So we did ensure that there's an agreement in the community benefits agreement for the Salem power plant to allow for the land of power from an offshore wind development, if that ever was to occur, and to install a converter station at that property. There's also a specific shutdown date for that power plant. And if you remember the slides at the beginning and what's finally now coming out even in a national arena, 2050 is the net zero date anyway, right? So 2050 is the date that power plant is supposed to shut down. So that means there's even additional possibilities for that property at that point. So I'm going to hand it back to Pat.
I actually saw the 3-minute warning that you gave, Chris. Is it okay for us to go on for just a couple of minutes?
I think we have room for two more minutes.
Okay, great. So I just wanted to say that one of the other great concerns of SAFE is that we look at this new industry of offshore wind, new to the United States, but not new to Europe. In fact, Europe has been test driving this technology for 20 plus years, and they have shown us the way that we can go ahead with offshore wind. So a lot of the groundwork has been tried, and proved to be true in Europe. So we are looking for opportunities where we can really change things in this new industry, that we can have more equitable investment. In other words, that it isn't all just white people who are investing in a technology like offshore wind, but that we really go out of our way to make sure that people of color in particular and low-income communities have opportunities to become engaged both in the investment part of this new technology, and more importantly for more people, that there is an equitable development of jobs, and that there is training for jobs, and that there is a commitment to good wages, and that there is a commitment to career ladders, that we're not looking at getting people just into dead-end jobs. So there are jobs working, there would be jobs if we're Salem, we're lucky to land an offshore wind support facility at the site of at the footprint site there. There would be an opportunity for jobs there, but there would then be opportunities, as Cindy mentioned, up and down the coast, where there would be other ports participating in a supply chain port connection among all of our ports on the North Shore of Massachusetts, but going up to New Hampshire and Maine as well. So that's a big concern of ours in Salem. We have a large environmental justice community in Salem. It's important to us that many of the opportunities for jobs, career development, go to those segments of our community, as well as everybody who wants to participate in this new technology. So I'll leave it there. Thanks, Chris, for giving us a little more time.
And just to close us out, this is really just introductory. We want to make sure that, people continue to engage. There are public hearings that are going on public meetings for the harbor planning and the Port Authority. SAFE is going to have one coming up. And then just make your voices heard. It's not all about the South Shore. We need to engage our elected leaders to proactively plan and financially support ports on the north of Boston to be able to, potentially take part in what this, very, very large economic engine that's coming forward is going to be, and make sure that we do it in the right way. So we want to make sure that that happens as well. And I'll just leave you with our.
Excellent. Thank you both so much for that. That was an amazing presentation. Yeah, excellent. Let's see, I'm going to just get to my first question here. Sorry about that. All right, so yeah, I have a few questions here, and just a reminder, if you have any questions that pop into your head while we're continuing this conversation, feel free to send me a direct message with the question, and I will read it to our panelists as long as we continue to have time for it. So we'll get started. This is kind of more open-ended to all of our panelists, and it was addressed just a little bit just now by SAFE, but I'm sure people are interested in hearing from each of the towns. This question is, how is each town or city addressing the environmental justice aspects of their sustainability and resiliency efforts? Have they built an equity component to the approaches they will take? So I will give it away. I'll see maybe if Erina or Lynn wanna jump on that real fast.
I can say on behalf of Sustainable Marblehead that while we are not in the position as a community organization to set policy for the town, environmental justice is one of the many factors that we do look at when we evaluate our support for pending projects. So I think that it's really important that it's gaining so much of a priority right now, and it's something that it's certainly a lens that is very important for Sustainable Marblehead as we look at projects and initiatives.
No, add to that. So through the Resilient Together planning process, equity really is considered as one of our key principles. And even something that we've observed over the last year through the COVID pandemic is that we know that communities of color and that service workers are disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. And the folks that are most impacted by the pandemic also have overlap with and are often the same communities that are going to be most impacted by climate risks. So we know it's really important to be, engaging in working with those neighborhoods even. So one thing that Esmeralda Bisono, she's the lead for Resilient Together in Salem, and I had participated on a focus group for the plan with our neighborhood and faith-based leaders a few weeks ago, and kind of learned that, we asked some folks how climate might be coming up in discussions at their churches, temples, in their neighborhood organizations. And we knew that kind of overwhelmingly, actually, climate wasn't really coming up as a question, as a concern. People aren't thinking about what about the urban heat island effect when there's an urgently important task at hand of meeting people's very basic needs. So that's keeping people housed, making sure they have food, providing support in the event of a job loss. So while that landscape, I think, has changed a little bit now, given where we are kind of in the season and in the pandemic, but I think still climate issues often feel very far removed from the people who are providing service on the ground and the people who are living in our environmental justice communities. So, one thing that we did see is kind of an increased, like a galvanized kind of coalition, right, around that we're providing social services and improving coordination. So the city had created a system for emergency calls that we know can reach more people now. That type of communication could be used for and in response to kind of more climate-induced storms, et cetera. So that's kind of from the resilience and the planning side of things. And then for sustainability, kind of more generally, more broadly, one of the projects that we're really looking forward to launching is a partnership with our utility National Grid in really prioritizing how to get the benefits of energy efficiency programs and programs like Mass Save, which you might have heard of before, to the people who typically don't get to see those benefits. So how do we prioritize our renter communities that might be living in multifamily homes or in apartment complexes where the landlord doesn't foot the bill for your heating costs, so might not be that interested in installing insulation in the walls or upgrading an old heating system. So we'll be kind of working on and focusing our outreach in those communities. So a few examples.
Thank you. Let's see. I don't know if Pat or Cindy, you wanted to add any more to that. It seemed like you were fairly thorough in terms of your commitment to working on social justice with this. But
well, I'll just add that when all of us as environmentalists talk about environmental justice, that I would like to say that I think this is great that these three contiguous towns are talking with each other. And I can give you an example of like how you can support environmental justice. When Salem goes forward, as we are going forward to try to capture some of the offshore wind industry at the footprint site in Salem, to have you be supportive of that would be very important. When years ago, and I don't like to dwell in ancient history with wind, but I will, when Salem tried to put a wind turbine out on Winter Island, the major opposition to that wind turbine came from Marblehead. There were large donors in Marblehead who provided funding to hire a lawyer. Let's consider that ancient past, and not go back to that. And let's think about the Salem's new effort to get into wind and renewable energy as this offshore wind overture that we're making. And hopefully you can be supportive. Beverly and Marblehead can be, and all of the towns throughout the North Shore can be supportive of this enterprise, because if we do land something, an industry supporting offshore wind at the Salem site, Sure, it's going to be in everybody's view site. We're all going to see it at some time. And just as the turbines in Cape Wind got torpedoed by folks who did not want to look at wind turbines, there may be some folks who won't want to look at the nuts and bolts of putting offshore wind turbines on floating docks that are out there in the ocean. But I would say that if we could get the Marblehead Salem community, the Salem and Beverly sailing communities, boating communities, to feel as if, yeah, we're in favor of renewable energy, we're in favor of offshore wind, and we are going to do whatever we can to support it. So there are ways that you can support it, even if you don't have large environmental justice neighborhoods in your community. Cindy, you want to add to that?
Thank you. So the next question is, again, another kind of more general question, I think is of relevance to a lot of us in these democratic committees, is have people identified elected officials that we need to influence, either locally, state, national? Do we have a radar of kind of who those people are that we might need to push the needle on a little bit more? Okay, we'll start. I'll see if, Erina, do you have any thoughts in terms of Beverly?
It's a good question, and no. But if you know of some people that we need to be working on, then please, I am all ears. I know, we're really excited about a lot of the kind of federal level announcements that have been going on, and I'm assuming that this group is kind of fairly plugged in, at least to the Biden administration's climate summit from last week and the kind of newer commitments for reduction of our greenhouse gas emissions by 50 to 52% by 2030, which is only nine years away at this point. And yet locally, or more, I would say statewide, it took a little bit of nudging for Governor Baker to sign the climate bill. And we understand that there were, a couple of pinch points that were preventing his full support. One of them was a net zero energy building code. So that's kind of one that ultimately, I believe, did get passed. And now the state has about 18 months to create that code. So I'm kind of looking at the, I suppose, state and regional levels. But from the Beverly perspective, everyone that I've been working with has been very supportive. Fortunately, I feel very grateful for that kind of local leadership and support from the council for a lot of our climate endeavors.
That's a good way to kind of phrase that then in terms. So I guess I saw Camron raise his hand a little bit if he has ideas of any roadblocks in Marblehead.
I'm actually the reverse. I wanted to just congratulate our team, our group. We're trying to build partnerships with town officials, and again, the one that I'm really I can't take credit for was somebody from our group and made this whole initiative to adopt a drain program. So she reached out, typed up a letter, reached out to the Board of Selectmen, went to the town meeting, reached out to DPW, and they're really like making that like a win-win out of that. And now with the new harbor plan that Lynn mentioned, I've had meetings with the harbor master and the town administrator, and they're very much on board with what we're trying. So just letting them know that we're kind of on their side, trying to help them. And then finally, Lynn and I are going to meet with the Board of Health next week. And so it's just kind of, I feel like, instead of thinking I'm trying to be more of an optimist. Instead of looking for roadblocks, look for the people that are willing to have these discussions and see how we can help them at a local town level.
Excellent. What about Pat and Cindy? Are there any kind of roadblocks you feel like you're experiencing in terms of local leaders currently who you feel like we could potentially move the needle on?
I think one of the things that can be done is that we can push Governor Baker to make sure that a leading indicator for the purchasing of more power offshore should not be lowering the cost of electricity all the time. Massachusetts was way ahead of other states in the mid-Atlantic, in particular, New York and other mid-Atlantic states, in terms of the number of megawatts that we wanted to purchase from offshore wind. And many of those other states are now ahead. New York is ahead of us. New Jersey is ahead of us. And that's because Governor Baker and this Republican administration wants every additional procurement of wind to be cheaper than the one before it. And I think that that's a kind of ridiculous, and that's sort of tying one of our hands behind our backs as we move forward into this era of offshore wind. And I also want to give a big shout out to all of us Democrats and say that, you know, it was not a Republican governor who signed this great climate bill that put Massachusetts on the map. It was the Democratic legislature that held his feet to the fire, that when he pocket vetoed the first climate bill, they passed the same climate bill again and sent it to him. And it was clear that they would pass the climate bill over his veto. So it was really a Democratic legislative victory that brought us this great climate plan. And I really think that we should congratulate ourselves about that.
Absolutely. Excellent. So I guess the next question I have is a little bit Marblehead related. So I'm going to ask them both the three at the same time. You can answer them all three. The first one was wondering if Marblehead, in terms of tree planting, is planting trees native to Massachusetts. The second one was referring to the partnership with green boating, I believe, asking if divers are involved in that process too, people who appreciate kind of going out and diving in the waters, if you're getting that community involved in that effort. And then the third question, Marblehead specific, was about the shrink wrap recycling, wondering if that would include, say, the plastic bags that one gets in a grocery store.
Okay.
Do you want to take the tree? I get the tree.
I'll start with the trees. Yes, so the trees were, I have a list, but unfortunately I don't have it right in front of me at my fingertips. The trees were purchased by our tree warden, and I believe that they were chosen with their being appropriate for being planted in Marblehead in our climate. That's been one of the problems that we've had in the past, is that there hasn't been an overall tree plan, so that we've been unfortunately planting trees that aren't necessarily native and they haven't survived. So I apologize, I don't have it right in front of me what the list of trees was that was planted, but they were, I believe, chosen by our tree warden with that in mind. The question of diving, James, can you speak to that about the green?
Yeah, we're, we our focus is to reach out to as many stakeholders and partners as possible. The awareness campaign, really, which this last year around the green boating content, was very broadly promoted. We worked with the Harbor Master's office to have signage at town landings. We did a lot of digital promotion through Sustainable Marblehead's social media accounts, what have you, and had signage in town and what have you. And then we did partner with some other groups. We do not have a dive specific group, but if anybody knows of them, we did speak to some commercial divers in town as part of our stakeholder conversations, but we have a rowing club here in town. We reached out to them, the kayaking paddle community, and certainly the yacht clubs. But the diving specific or a recreational diving or commercial diving specific organization, we haven't found a really efficient way to reach that audience. So any suggestions would be appreciated on that. It's an ongoing campaign, so we appreciate those ideas. Then briefly on the shrink wrap. So the shrink wrap effort, we're working with a company called Dynamic Waste Systems, and those containers, we have a container at the Marblehead transfer station, and this is a specific the shrink wrap is a specific type of material. The recycling stream is a domestic recycling stream focused on that particular type of soft plastic. And again, if anybody wants, we can email me at, actually, we'll give you the general Sustainable Marblehead email, but we can certainly give you that input as to where to go to get one of those containers. The soft plastic, we all know that's a big headache. Here in town, there's a couple of us that are working with an organization that collects soft plastic to make eco bricks, if you've heard of that. And the name of that company is House Factory. We, during the pandemic, we found the soft plastic, we couldn't put them at the grocery stores. There's problems with that to begin with. But so we started, actually, I personally started bringing the soft plastic up to this group up in Newberry, and they've been now coming to town to pick up some soft plastic. But that's a big issue. I think we're all aware of what we do with soft plastic that's just household and what have you. It's a big problem. But unfortunately, the shrink wrap program does not solve that one. I hope that helps. Thank you.
Just another word on that. Our conservation working group has been working to create these eco bricks. So they've been collecting some of the soft plastics, and there's a group of volunteers that are making the eco bricks. We've donated over 100 of them back to the Eco Brick Company. And there's also the Stop and Shop, I understand, is now accepting the plastic bags back. So people want to take their bags there. And I just want to, in answer to the tree questions, to say that what was planted last week was 5 red maples, 4 hornbeams, 3 yellow woods, 4 ginkgos, 3 honey locusts, and 5 swamp white oaks, and 4 ivory silk lilacs. So those were the trees that were selected for the 3 streets that they were planted on.
Thank you all. Let's see, we have a little less than 10 minutes. So I'm going to ask just 2 more questions that are kind of to the Salem Safe Offshore Wind aspect. One was asking, and I saw you responded to me specifically, Cindy, about it, but I'll let you kind of speak on it very quickly, asking about why there are no offshore wind projects on the North Shore right now. And then the second one was asking just about the jobs, if we have an idea of like how many jobs we could be getting, when we think that could be coming, and if we were planning on them being kind of specifically union jobs versus non-union.
Well, I'll take the first question and I'll let Pat take the second. So the reason there's no offshore wind up here on the North Shore is twofold. One, there's no longer any designated area for offshore wind development. So what they do is kind of like they use the same model as the oil rig models, which they designate an area that can be then bid on by a developer, and then the developer then starts to design what they're perhaps going to look at putting into that area. So there is no areas designated up here yet. And part of that reason was really, again, the focus on shallower waters and needing to have something move forward before developers were going to look further afield. And so now that those permits are starting to move forward, I think that will start to move forward as well. There is a tri-state Bureau of Ocean and Energy Management committee for Northern Mass, New Hampshire, and Maine that will be looking to set those areas. So that will be the next step.
The part about the jobs is of course it's all speculative, and we can base what has happened in terms of jobs on what happened in Europe around ports in terms of jobs. But one of the really, and we will do that. We are in the process of doing it, predicting jobs and categories of jobs for offshore wind. But the thing that's uniquely different about the Biden administration's announcement about making this infrastructure for energy being based on good paying jobs is that his administration is saying over and again, these are going to be good paying, clean energy, union jobs. And by union jobs, it means that people are going to be making a living wage. They are going to be protected by contracts. They are not going to be subject to the vagaries of a boss's decisions about things, but that there will be a real protection for workers, as well as a protection for whatever the companies are that are hiring these people who are become union members and are certified to be trained and capable and reliable in terms of these very important jobs. So you'll be seeing a lot more, and it will be coming from us and from a group that we belong to two groups. We belong to, SAFE belongs to Massachusetts for offshore wind and New England for offshore wind. And we meet every month with both of those groups, and we talk about the way, just as the three cities and towns here, I guess, yeah, cities and towns here are talking about collaboration and looking out for what's happening in those towns. All of the New England, the states, all the New England states are beginning to look to each other to support each other in terms of how can we capitalize on the energy and how can we capitalize on jobs.
Thank you. And thank you to all of our panelists today. I'm going to start to wrap it up, I think, so that we can give Marblehead Dems plenty of time for their business meeting. But yeah, I just wanted to say a final thanks to all of our panelists today for joining us. It was really lovely. It was lovely to hear from Erina about what's going on in Beverly with the Resilient Together program, and kind of as that's starting to get underway, as well as the two pump station project and the Aubert Park project. It was excellent hearing from Lynn, James, and Camron about what's going on in Marblehead and the initiatives that they're taking under the planting of the trees, the working with boaters, which is something is awesome to think about, because I hadn't even thought about like connecting with boating communities, but that's obviously so essential because they're an essential part of that kind of ecosystem. And thank you to Pat and Cindy for talking about Salem Safe and all of the work that you've been doing over the past 20-ish years now, and the work that you're doing to get offshore wind a reality in this area. That's really incredible. We had Lynn Nadeau from Marblehead wanted to mention about the proposed Peabody peaker plant that's happening. I know that there was a DPU hearing about it today in terms of the finance deal, which is just something that kind of ties into, although you wouldn't necessarily think about it, it really ties into what our groups are trying to do, which is for this election cycle, at least, trying to make sure that Charlie Baker is not the governor anymore, because it's definitely one of those things where it doesn't matter how much we complain to the DPU at the moment. The people who are in charge of the DPU are appointed by Baker, and as much as he says that he supports climate change initiatives, the people that he puts in his administration in these positions have a tendency to favor the energy companies and what it is that they want in the short term for these situations. So I think kind of if people are hearing at the end of this feeling fired up and like excited as I am about the different ways that we can work together to continue to work on resiliency and sustainability efforts in our collective communities, I would definitely, if you can, reach out to myself, to Renee, to Hannah and Jim, to find ways, and we'd love to connect you with these people to kind of get more involved in these resiliency efforts. I don't want to speak for Renee and Jim necessarily, but I know I will be kind of giving a little summary out to the Salem Dems, and I'm sure they will as well. I think if our panelists are willing, I would love to share the slides that were shared as well with the group. But yeah, we will definitely get that out to everybody. And with that, I'm going to kind of say thank you to everybody for joining us. And for this, I'm really excited. It was really exciting for me to get this together. It was very important for me for it to be a joint thing for everybody to be able to talk about what we're all doing together and kind of be able to encourage each other and beat off of our ideas, really. So yeah, thank you all so much.
Thanks so much, Chris, for suggesting that we collaborate on this tonight. I know I learned I learned a lot. It's just so interesting. you know, to hear what our neighbors are doing. And, you know, even though we're like, you know, you could holler across the street, you don't always know what's going on beyond your borders. So this is terrific. And I really appreciate everyone coming tonight. So as Chris mentioned, Marblehead RDTC does have a business meeting that we must get in tonight. So everyone's always welcome to join us at our meetings, but I definitely am asking our committee folks to stay on a little bit longer because we do have some business to take care of. And so anyone else who's leaving us, we'd just like to say goodnight and thanks for coming. Jim and Hannah, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, I just want to, on behalf of the Beverly Democratic City Committee, really want to thank both you, Renee and Chris, for putting this together. And it was really very informative, and I'm so happy about it. And just to end on a moment of levity, and on my screen, my picture is right beside Chris's, and I think we look like a before and after kind of situation. So, but anyway, I really enjoyed it, and I hope everybody has a good evening.
Thanks. I do want to acknowledge Eileen Matthew. I don't know if she is still on right now, but Eileen is our program director for the committee and really did the bulk of the work in putting this together from the Marblehead end. So I want to thank Eileen as always for that.
Agreed. I definitely want to send a shout out to Eileen myself as well. She was invaluable, a great partner to have in setting this up. So.
Okay.
So Chris and Renee, this is Pat again, can I just remind you that a week from this Thursday, SAFE will be presenting another program on offshore wind. So if your interest was piqued by this, shoot us an email at salemsafe@gmail.com. I'll make sure that you're put on the SAFE listserv, and you'll get information, the link for the presentation a week from this Thursday on May 6th at 6:30. And we'll be talking some more about offshore wind and Salem and what we see as possibilities. Thanks a lot for being attentive.
Thanks, Pat. I'll definitely send that out.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Good night.
See you soon. Thanks, Erina. Okay.